why did you get into EMS? Did you see the people coming in and you thought that looks like a pretty cool job?
Honestly, that's a lot of it. When I became a nursing assistant, it was out of necessity for, finding a job at the time. I was, really kind of unskilled and was in retail prior to even thinking of the medical field. And when I took my nursing assistant class, it gave me an opportunity to work in the ER. And while I was in there, I realized that I really have nothing in common with the people who are working there. And it was really kind of a miserable environment, having this really weird sense of humor and coping mechanisms and
oh, like the black humor, the nurses.
Yeah, the really dark
Art and
kind
I
of
talked
stuff.
about that earlier. We were talking about how the lay people, the public, wouldn't understand if he and I were to say, well, we had a really cool call.
Right.
And the cool call was somebody with, bleeding all over the place.
Right.
Or, missing half their head.
A friend of mine was on ski patrol, and he talked me into joining it. So I went through all the classes, and I enjoyed being on ski patrol.
Yeah.
The patient care portion of it, but I did not like the skiing at all.
But how did you cross over? Like, how did you say, I'm going to be a ski patroller, or I'm a ski patroller, I want to be an EMT?
There were a few people on ski patrol that were EMTs.
Okay.
And they were talking to me about their experiences on the ambulance, and I said, that sounds like something I like to do.
It is.
And so, I got into it little by little,
yeah.
And after having worked at GE for 35 years, I wanted to give something back. I did pretty well at GE, and I brought up 2 kids, put them through school, and bought a few houses, and now this is what I enjoy doing. This is like it's not even work.
Right.
I was no doubt that I was a whoop. There was when I was young, really young, they had the red phone. What was the red phone back at my grandmother's house? And if we were down in the barn, you could hear the phone because there was an outside bell. You'd hear the bell go off, and then she'd take the call, and then she'd hit the siren. So we oftentimes knew that it was coming. So I kind of grew up in that,
Right.
and it just came natural to continue being a fireman. And I went from Clarksburg, and then I moved to Florida.
EMS wasn't part of it, though, right? Was it the funeral home at that time? I mean, we're going back.
Pretty much. Well, they used to do resuscitator calls. So what they would do is they'd bring the ventilator, and if somebody coded, they'd, bag them supposedly with positive pressure ventilation.
Like the demand valve.
Yeah, and blow their lungs out, and then, they'd get there, they'd be blue. The ambulance would come flying up, throw them in the back, and then drive to the hospital really, really fast. So that's kind of how that got started. I really didn't do a lot of that. I never got the opportunity because I was a little too young for that.
Now you're talking in your teens at this point.
Yeah, late
teens.
When I moved to Florida, I was 17. They had a big thing up in Florida where a girl got kidnapped.
I remember that.
Lynn Burdick was her name.
Yeah.
And the fire department was out for weeks trying to find her. It was before I joined, and it was kind of the thing that said, you really ought to get back into this because you had a lot of fun and you did a great thing. So after that was done, I decided I'd go to the fire station and try to join. And I did, and I've been there ever since. I was a mechanic. I went to mechanic school for automotive, and I was a mechanic in the beginning.
Right. Like an automotive mechanic.
Automotive mechanic, cars and trucks.
Was your dad a mechanic too? Or?
No, he was just a farmer who was mechanically inclined.
I got you.
So I figured I'd go into automotive. I'd be able to repair tractors and stuff like that, and the balers, and help him out. Well, then the farm kind of folded, and then I went to work in a garage, and I spent the first 5 or 6 years in a garage turning wrenches.
You were bitten by the EMS bug.
Absolutely.
It pulls you in.
Absolutely. It's the camaraderie, the cool calls, the good ones, the ones that we talk about forever, that we never forget.
What were your reasons? I mean, the lights and sirens at first.
Obviously, the lights and sirens are the cool thing. That was obviously the start of it. But then the really good call, and you really can make a difference when you see somebody that you bring in, or that you first see and they look like crap, and you make them better. And you feel good, and then somebody pats you on the back later on and says thanks.
Yeah.
At the tones go off in Beckett for, a person who fell out of a tree. And so we're sitting at the end of the driveway, knowing that they're going to call for a paramedic, going, we're going to do this call, we're so excited. So we end up hearing the dispatch, getting called. So we get this guy, he fell probably 20 feet out of a tree. It was his first day on the job at this tree company. I felt so bad for him. So he fell out of the tree and, he landed on his back and we rolled him over, checking his back and, right in the thoracic lumbar area, feel this huge deformity, right at the spinal column. We're like, oh, that's not good. So, we rolled him back onto the backboard and we're assessing neurofunction and he had none in his legs. But as we loaded him up into the ambulance and, we started working him up the ALS and the whole 9 yards. And as we're talking to him, we noticed that he has these scars all over his anterior chest and his arms. And it was like burn scars. And his face was fine, but it was like all over. And we're talking to him in the back of the ambulance and come to find out that, it was his first day on the job. And probably about 2 years prior to working there, he, on another job site, was outside and got struck by lightning. And that's how he ended up with all of the burns all over his body. So not only did this man, survive death once,
Right.
But now twice, with the fall, because it was a pretty significant fall. And, only to come to find out, instead of wearing the scars, he'll be, paralyzed for the rest of his life.
So it's not necessarily like the nastiest call.
No.
It's more the emotional.
No.
About some successes you've had. You ever walked out of the ER and high five someone and said, "This is awesome"?
The best success I ever had was a gentleman who happens to live in Florida who was in a motor vehicle accident. We got to the scene, and it was a man I know. I've known him for years, and he's in the car, unresponsive after hitting a bridge abutment. Checked for a pulse. There was no pulse. Pulled him out onto the ground, started CPR, zapped him into asystole, which is pretty, it's what you expect.
Yeah.
Got him in the truck, got a line, got him tubed, gave him some drugs, and got a pulse back. Had a good blood pressure when we dropped him off. 2 weeks later, he showed up at the ambulance service and gave me a hug. Best success I ever had. Yeah. There's been lots of really great calls, but that's probably my best.
Yeah. When you can physically touch somebody, that.
Yeah. Not only did he walk out of the ER out of the hospital with his bags, he came back and gave me a hug 2 weeks later.
How would I react? I've gone to the home of a real good friend, very, very, very close friend, and the call came in as unresponsive, so I thought I was going to a cardiac arrest. And I had gotten there, and he was awake. He had gone out for a run in the heat, and it got to him, and he passed out. But it was pretty scary on the way up there, thinking, oh my God, what's happened to him? Is he going to live? Am I going to be able to take care of him? Am I going to be able to pull him out of it? You get all these thoughts going through your head. And even though I think those same thoughts when I'm going to a cardiac arrest for someone I don't know, it's different when you go to someplace where this person is that you know.
So
There's a little more anxiety there. Yeah.
Speaking of that, it's no secret you've had some health issues of your own. You had a heart attack, right?
Yeah.
When?
5 years ago.
And how did you present with that? If you can run through that.
Let's see.
What were you doing? Where did you wake
I was
up?
just sitting at a kitchen table, talking with some relatives, and I had chest pain, and sudden onset diaphoresis, and a lot of weakness. I couldn't stand up. And I told Jay, call 911, I'm having an MI. And she looked at me and I said, I'm serious. And so she did. And I knew everything that was going to happen. Everything. And it happened exactly as I knew it would. They picked me up. They took me down the stairs in a stair chair. They started
Was it
an
your
IV.
peers that picked you up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And They did everything. I knew everything they were going to do. I knew exactly what was going on. I knew what was going to happen from moment to moment.
Do you think you would have had a heart attack if you weren't doing this?
Yes.
You do?
In fact, I was surprised I hadn't had one before that. My father died of cardiac arrest at 43. He had his first heart attack in his 30s, so I knew I had it in my DNA. And I was 56 when it happened to me. So I was kind of expecting it. It's always been in the back of my mind, you know, this happened to my father. I know that's in my blood. Is it going to happen to me? Or not just is it going to happen to me, but when's it going to happen to me?
And of course,
even though I was taking care of myself, you know, my weight was down. I was running several days a week. I was eating the right foods. I was doing the right stuff, but there are some things you can't correct or change, and that's your family history.
Right.
You know.
Well,
It probably would have happened anyway, but it happened to me 20 years later. My father had his first heart attack in his 30s.
Right.
I had mine in my 50s. So I think my lifestyle helped somewhat.
And I bring this up because that's really what people see us as, not necessarily unhealthy. They have this picture that we're the picture of health. Maybe not physically, some of us, but for the most part, they think, oh, they're in the medical profession, they eat great, and it's like half of us smoke, we eat crap food, you know, and, you know, there's statistics out there that cover EMS and firemen about how the stress of going to calls and then unwinding really can attribute to heart attacks. So you don't think it precipitated it, this job?
No, I don't think the job had anything to do with it. I think it was all due to my family history. Yeah. Because, like I said, I was eating right. I was exercising. I don't smoke. I was doing all the right things, and it happened anyway, you know. So, but it's been good for 5 years now. I had a stent put in, and it's so far